Hello and welcome. We are live again on Eunuch Corner Club. Thank you all for joining us again. I'm joined today by my British co-host, who likes to be called English instead of British, Kizza GT. We're also joined by Bill from a long line of American jackasses who runs the channel All Minus One. And last but not least, we're joined by Sterling, who runs the channel Evidence Violates Community Guidelines. So we'll get this started off right. We have a lot to talk about today. Bill, my friend, go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us about yourself and your channel.
Yeah, my name is Bill, of course, and I have a little channel called All Minus One, which is based on John Stuart Mills's essay about free speech and why free speech is important. I cover classically liberal ideas, economics, a little bit of news, depending on the mood I'm in. I'm up and coming, I guess. I have less than 50 subscribers. I have another live show called The Ends Justify the Memes. It's a little bit more loose. We kind of drink on stream, try to have fun, but also have serious conversations. My background, I'm nearly 40. I was corrections for a long time, private security. Before that, I was in the Marine Corps. And I'm just a guy who's infinitely curious. I read a lot of stuff, and that's pretty much it.
I didn't know I was muted myself. What a jackass I am. Let's move over to Sterling. Hey there, Sterling. Why don't you take a moment and do the same? Tell us about who you are and what kind of channel you have over there, friend.
Thank you for having me on today. Hawaii hellos all around to all the good folks out there. I run the Evidence Violates Community Guidelines channel. I come from a couple different spheres, and my interests include exploring popular narratives to see how true or untrue they may be. I also do what I do to have some fun, as well as hopefully move a discourse between peoples closer toward peace and truth.
All right. Kizza, how are you doing today, my English friend?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
All right. Now, before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that we do have Streamlabs now, as well as Entropy. Streamlabs is giving me a little frustration. It is new to me. I don't know if I have it programmed or set up correctly because it's being frustrating, but I will be working on that behind the scenes. But as usual, we do have Entropy up and running, which I'll be sharing in the chat right now. Entropy is where you can send us super chats, donations. I will definitely give priority to the people who give us paid comments and questions to read. And you can also leave comments and questions for the whole panel over in the question widget. That'll be on the left-hand side of the Entropy tab. So go ahead and check that out. Excuse me. Now, while I start working on Streamlabs behind the scenes to see if I can get that working, I want to start off the conversation today by asking both Kizza and Evidence here, Sterling, if they would argue about why he should be named after the British pound.
Oh, starting off the show with drama and conflict. All right, here we go. You ready, Kizza? Let's make this an international incident as much as we can. You go first.
Well, what is there to argue? He clearly is a very sound of the pound guy.
Oh, you're a funny guy. You're funny. Oh. Okay, in all seriousness, let's have a serious conversation. Let's go ahead and start with Bill over here. Bill, you said that you embrace American libertarian ideals, and you are concerned about classic liberalism itself. Now, Kizza, I believe, is rather well-versed in English liberalism, and I know that for a fact Kizza has worked with English liberals over there himself. When it comes to classic liberalism, Bill, can you give us a starting off point of what about that is the important thread behind your work and why you view liberalism, classic liberty, as a core value and what you should spend your time focusing on?
Well, sure. I think first off, I like to frame everything in that we have this false dichotomy of beliefs right now, right? There's liberalism, which is progressivism out there. And then there is conservatism, which I consider generally to be classically liberal. Edmund Burke was the father of modern conservatism, and he was a classical liberal. So the idea is to maximize the freedom of the people. We know that we need some sort of government, a minarchist type government, and to keep structure and to protect people's liberties. But otherwise, we want people to be as free as possible, to have free exchange, to be able to pursue whatever goals they want in their life. With that, though, we obviously need a government that is willing to pursue criminals and protect your liberties. And I think that that is probably the best form of government that we've come across without being totalitarian. But within that, we also have to have a strong spiritual and cultural reality, or how do I want to put this? We need to have strong patriotism for what those ideas are. We need to believe in that very deeply as a culture, and it's been eroded over time. And so I see calls to progressivism, as whether we're talking about, fascism, socialism, or communism, as the replacement of those individual beliefs within the collective to just the pure collective. I hope that's a sufficient answer for you there, Yiz.
Well, it's not really about being a sufficient answer, and it was fine, yes. The reason I wanted you to bring it up is I know that Kizza has his own particular view on liberalism, classic English liberalism, etc., its values, its failings, and I am unfamiliar as to what Sterling thinks. So I thought this would be a good sort of roundtable discussion about those values, how they're good and how they're bad, and how each person views them. Let's go ahead and start off with Kizza over there.
Well, for myself, although I would consider myself a somewhat libertarianish, some of my views are somewhat contradictory to the narrative, in the sense that for me, I support almost absolute personal freedom. However, I prefer to treat that like a double-edged sword. So, for instance, I don't support the concept of universal rights. I support what I'd like to call subscription rights.
And unless you say what those are, people are not going to know, Kizza.
Okay, so when I refer to subscription rights, what I mean to say is for people like us who are more the classical liberal / libertarian types, we will have almost the maximum personal freedom we have. Whereas you have those who don't value those concepts and principles very highly, they don't get the benefit of such concepts themselves.
Can I ask a question about that? Is that kind of like
Yes.
Heinlein's thinking, where you have to you have to serve in order to be a citizen and have actually full rights and to participate in the government?
Is that from Starship Troop? The idea behind Starship Troopers, was it? I'm not completely familiar with his work.
Yeah, well, Starship Troopers is actually a collection of short stories that he wrote that was then put into a book. But generally speaking, Heinlein was considered a classically liberal conservative, and he much kind of modeled the idea after the Roman Empire, and that in order to be a citizen, if you weren't born into citizenship, if you weren't part of the upper class, that you had to join the military or do some sort of service. And of course, back in those days, they made you have a 20-year contract to become a citizen. So it basically made you invest in the society.
Okay, yeah. So I'm not necessarily thinking in that level of perspective. What I'm more speaking of, let's say, for instance, of our enemies, which are currently causing trouble in the United States, I would say to those types of people, okay, you support this idea. Okay, then, say bye-bye to your private property rights.
Well, wouldn't that just be jailing somebody then, and all of those kind of things? I mean, we have asset forfeiture laws in the United States for drug dealers and other criminals, primarily the drug war. So you lose your rights in the United States, and technically, according to the Constitution, you can even be made a slave in the United States still, as long as you are first prosecuted and indicted.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my mentality is that if you generally support a different set of values, I would argue, okay, then, how about you live up to those values? And if you become a victim of such values, you don't come crying to me.
Right. No, I mean, I understand that. I talk a lot. I'm very much into psychology. I talk a lot about the psychological projection of the left and all kinds of stuff that's there that I don't think that these people are actually productive parts of society. The problem, of course, and I'm sure it's the same over in like the UK. The problem, of course, in Western society right now is that the government, the institutional part of the government, is all for this kind of crazy corruption so that they can get in their ultimate power, I would say, their ultimate scheme of globalism and one world communism.
Well, that is true, but because the idea is that they import in lots of migrant labor to depress wages, to cause division and social and cause division and diversion, which case they'll naturally gain more power because the migrants will vote for them, because people who have lower, as it's been suggested, that people with lower IQs and less English values will naturally vote for more government, and it's just an ongoing cycle until you reach the tipping point where you get a totalitarian society.
Yeah, and I think it actually goes beyond just, I mean, IQs is definitely an important factor, but it goes beyond that. I mean, if you think about just pure incentives from an economic standpoint, or from like an evolutionary biologist type standpoint, evolutionary psychology standpoint, you're going to see that there's just incentives to people moving to England instead of being in a war zone and or just an area where there's poor economic opportunity, to go move to a first world country where then they are giving a ton of welfare. So in the US some years ago, Ron Paul talked about this, about just cutting off the welfare system for the illegal immigrants, and they'll quit coming. The problem on the left, or at least what they espouse, is that they don't acknowledge that that actually happens. And it absolutely does happen. It's a reality. People who come in illegally do get welfare, and it just keeps the cycle going on. So there's a lot of incentives there for people to move to these countries in order to have supposedly a better life. But unfortunately, it just brings all of that society down.
For sure. I mean, I've had this argument before with people say they're illegal immigrants, they can't claim welfare. I'm like, yes, they can, through child support. That's the most common way, if memory serves, unless I'm mistaken.
Right. Well, in the U.S., child support, healthcare, they can, a lot of times they get false social security numbers and IDs, and I've had lefties say, well, they pay into the system, they pay into taxes, like some of them, but there's been a lot of studies done that suggest that they take far more than they pay in.
I mean, I'm with Kizza here, that regardless of who pays in, the entire thing needs to basically be gutted and broken down, because it's a complete failure. It leaks money like a sieve. It's terrible. And on top of that, it's the people who are drawing out of it are also gaining more and more voting power. So it's basically just guaranteed socialism with a matter of time. That's why people like me and Kizza, and probably everyone here in this chat, thinks that we need to dramatically cut back or end both either the mass migration or the welfare state, preferably both. That's just my take on it.
Well, I'd agree. I mean, I'm okay with bringing in legal immigrants who are going to be good for the nation, but maybe we should just stop everything altogether for a while and get our heads straight and fix our infrastructure and all those things. I believe Brett Weinstein talks about often how in the 80s they were bringing over scientists, people in the STEM fields from other countries to undercut the wages of academics and the sciences. So it's not like it's just the blue collar worker that's affected by this either. It is all around. And again, all I was saying is those incentives that are given, obviously, eventually you get your citizenship, or like some places in the US where they want to just give people voting rights because they live here, regardless if they're a citizen or not. That's going to bolster up the left-wing perspective, the left-wing parties. And I think largely, it's just that incentive. And a lot of those people, unless they were under really strict, really harsh socialism or communism, they are going to just embrace those social policies.
Yeah, of course. And on top of that, you've got, I know that it works this way in the EU in many countries, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens in America, where you have sometimes people that even work for or kind of for government agencies actively campaigning with asylum seekers, migrant workers, refugees, specifically instructing them on how to exploit the welfare system, how to get their family members here, how to claim a family member has special needs or autism or whatever, just to maximize the welfare system, that the welfare benefits that they can get through the system. It's completely sick. It's a cancer that we have to do something about. And while I know that Rabbi Trumpelstein ain't exactly our guy, he has cut migration by half in the last couple of years, and that's saying something. So, that's at least a step in the right direction. That's why I don't think that we should just vote for accelerationism or whatever, vote for Biden just to watch it all burn or to try to accelerate people's awakening, because I think that Trump loves Trump more than anything else. Like, I think his real allegiance is to Donald Trump and his bank account. So, of course, that means he's got certain small hat leniences, but I do believe that he values his ego, and he knows that the American populace will stroke that ego more than anything else. So that's why I want to vote for him, and I think that'll be better for us in the short term than anything else. I know that was kind of a segue, but Sterling, you've been kind of quiet on all this. Do you want to chime in with anything?
Yes, personally, up until the last couple years, I've been sympathetic to or have adhered to some form of libertarian perspective. Currently, I don't see it as a viable option for a country unless a country's preferably racially homogenous, or even better, ethnically homogenous. That's the libertarian perspective has been turned against us here in the West, and even what people call good legal immigrants who have moved in and who would be good for the nation, which is a people and not a country. A lot of them have ended up having children who have grown up to brutalize indigenous girls here in the West. So we also need to be clear too, when we're talking about a nation, are we talking about a people? Are we talking ethnos, like it used to be more clear, or a country? Right now, I'm concerned about the attacks on worldwide Europa and on Western civilization, and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't believe in bringing people economically good. I'm more concerned about protecting people here in America and throughout the West that are clearly being targeted. We've seen that in the UK with the grooming and rape gangs. We've seen that in the United States as the authorities sit back and they let whites get robbed, raped, or murdered in broad daylight. So I'm more concerned now about what would protect my people here and my people worldwide. I'm going to put my libertarian preferences to the side in some ways because I don't see them as an effective strategy, and I also see them being exploited to our detriment.
Yeah, that's what led me to where I am today, because I'm of the sort of ANCAP libertarian, right-wing libertarian in America type of spiritual ethics or whatever, of live and let live, non-aggression principle, all that. But when I see how those values of ours have been blatantly and meticulously exploited for generations to cripple us, I don't think any amount of that kind of ideas or policies are going to dig us out of this hole that we're in. We need some kind of ethnocentric national resurgence to bring people together and actually push back and fight back, some kind of nationalist populist unity uprising type of thing. And of course, I don't mean violence. I'm not condoning everybody just going nuts and boogaloo and all that. I think that's a great way to get you and your family killed. I'm just talking about with rhetoric, with words. I think that we're going to have to jock up and have some kind of, I don't know, racial awakening in the West, because there is a clear and present organized agenda that wants to attack whites, specifically for being whites in white countries. And we don't see that phenomenon happening against other ethnicities of people in their countries. We only see it happening in ours this way. So I do think that what you said has a lot of credit, and that's why I think I don't know. Like I love the shine of the beauty and in my opinion, the ethical value of libertarian stuff. But I don't see it being able to play ball with the other people at the table these days. And I'll pass it back to you two.
Well, our greatest enemies in the towers and on the streets don't care about the non-aggression principle. They don't care about mutualism. They don't care about body sovereignty. They don't care about our property. They don't care about any of that. People who insist on being radical individualists or, quote, being above identity politics aren't going to be spared for adhering to those values. They are being targeted first and foremost because they were born into white bodies. Our enemies don't care if we're more liberal Christians or more conservative Christians. They don't care if we've donated our time, money, or resources to non-white groups or not.
Yeah, which is why I have the position that I do have, as in these types should be forced to live up to the sort of society they want to create. And when they become victims, that's when the rest of you show to the rest of the people, this is what these people want. Do you want this type of society? And they'll naturally, overwhelmingly say no.
Well, it's interesting because it's like I said, I think that there might be a need for sure to stop everything for a while, get our heads straight and whatever. It's interesting if you look at the word ethnic. Originally, what that meant was pagan. It meant outsiders. It meant people who were not your own people. Ethnos is something different. I think it's ethnokos or ethnikos or something like that in Greek, as far as what we get the word ethnic from, the outsiders, the pagans. And as far as being white and demonized, I've made this comparison for a while. It really seems to me no different than what was being done to the small hats in Germany under Hitler. It's people like to say it's different, but I mean, it really is. They're saying, well, white people have all the power. White people are evil. White people caused all of our trouble, and that just needs to go away, man. That's not correct. In fact, we built basically everything. And one last point before I get off this is that early on in the founding of America, we had discussions about allowing Germans in because our society was British. And even though there were some Dutch here, we were primarily British, and there was big concerns about allowing Germans in because Germans traditionally have more of a collective culture. Now, Americans had a credo collectivism, but they did not have that same, and they had obviously the ideas of the Magna Carta, the Constitution, these inalienable rights, but they did not have the same thinking as when a German says, we Germans. Like, we don't talk like that. I don't think people in England talk like that. You don't say we English or we Scots or we Welsh or whatever. You just say, me.
They don't. I've heard people talk like that.
That's very common. It's very common in Scotland, actually.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've been just saying, generally, people I talk to from the UK, I don't see them. I mean, I'm not saying they don't have a collective identity. I know Scotland certainly does, and all. But I guess my point is I think Germans see themselves very different, and that mentality, the founders kind of juxtaposed that. They were like, should we allow this in? And same reason why we didn't allow immigration of other nations, a lot of Eastern nations, and until the 1960s, until they did reform. I mean, America had very strict rules. We took Europeans in for a while, like in the 1880s to the 1920s, but a lot of them were Eastern Europeans or generally Western Europeans. And that was about it, because that was the closest thing to our in-group that was there. And before that, there wasn't a lot. There was some Chinese, a little bit of Japanese, but there wasn't a lot from elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, a lot of the East Asian immigration happened during the 50s, 60s, and 70s because of all the shit that was going on in Mao's China.
Right. And, I think too after that, because of Vietnam, I mean, we had a lot of people from Cambodia and Vietnam come this way. So that creates the whole refugee thing, and then that gets into, should we be to these global wars? And maybe you could argue that to fight communism was a good idea. I'm not sure that it's a good idea anymore. I think we need to hunker down. I wouldn't call myself an isolationist, but I am very much into that libertarian type idea of stay out of wars. And I'm not open borders. I never have been really. But yeah, it's just, there's so much that we are pushing towards globalism, and to even have these conversations, I think it's important, but to even have these conversations makes us almost radical, which is strange to me. It's just practical.
Well, yeah, I mean, by the sounds of it, I would say taking a page out of Switzerland, but having stronger borders would be a good start.
No, I love Switzerland. I think Switzerland's a great nation in general. They stay out of other people's business. They arm their populace.
And they certainly do like Jew gold. Let's move on to another topic now.
Sorry, yeah.
Let's speaking of gold, let's talk to Sterling. Sterling, let's shift gears here. You and I clearly we share some views and some ideas on things, but when it comes to a core value or something that you think needs to be talked about or done today, right now in America, why don't you pontificate on that some? Tell us a core value or a core thread of ideas that you think is highly important that should be introduced via activism to everybody.
A core value for me would be exposing anyone who would manufacture conflict within a people or between peoples. So for me, a core value is peace. The world on its own, before our greatest allies or our greatest local gangsters start causing problems, already has plenty of chaos, conflict, and darkness in it. So I'm interested. I'm very interested in contributing toward peace for my people, for all peoples.
You and me both. I think that I even made a video, I think it was maybe 7 months ago now, called The Marxist Lie of Racism, where I laid out that since the explosion of world wealth, the Industrial Revolution, manufacturing, mass consumerism, etc., basically lifted people across the entire world out of abject poverty and starvation, the old Marxist tactics didn't work anymore. So they had to move and sort of change gears a few generations ago to have other levers that they could drive between populations of countries to generate unrest and cause revolutions. And so we saw the sex revolution, and we've seen the racial revolution. And I think that those things are primarily driven by the modern Marxists of the Frankfurt School. And that is why we see now you have feminism, you have battle between the sexes, you've got feminism and all through schools and corporations and government wreaking havoc with people on a family level, business, government, school, and it's the same shit's happening with race now too. And I think that unless we can kick that to the curb and smash progressivism or cultural Marxism, or whatever you want to call it, I don't think that we're going to get out of this without a bloodbath. And I agree with you completely that that's where our focus needs to be, on awareness to normal people, is getting them to realize this, what you and I would call the anti-white narrative, but this endless Marxist war over race, because it's being forced on us. It's being forced on us through TV and schools and media and all this mess. And it's basically making people ready to kill each other. And it's terrible. I mean, look, it's happening in 40 cities across America right now. It's awful.
Right. Well, and we already have biological and cultural differences in us as a human family that can flare up long before we have interventionist hyenas making the problems or the possible
certainly.
problems.
I'm not saying that racial tensions and racial differences are completely fabricated by Marxists. No. I just mean those differences and those problems are being inflamed by those people.
Right. I was adding to. I wasn't. Yeah. No. You are good there. But yeah, I mean, there are very real differences between us, and and they're currently being exacerbated by the anti-white narrative. And some of these same people who run this narrative have also started the first stages of flooding mass migration into parts of Asia. Tens of thousands of South Africans have been brought into Malaysia. There's a current campaign kicking off in Japan about how Japan's not diverse enough. This is really an anti-white and an anti-human narrative, ultimately. And as far as I can tell, there's only one ethnicity and religion and country that's meant to survive in the end. But
we dare not speak its name.
Well, no, I mean, despite all the privilege, power, and supremacy we have over places like YouTube and Twitter and Facebook, somehow we still have to be careful too. It's that whole white supremacist 4D chess that even I can't follow as much as I try to study and understand things.
Well, I've always said I forget where I read it. I think it was from an old English author, but it was to know who has the real power, only look to who you're not allowed to criticize, or something like that.
Wasn't it Valtor? Wasn't it Valtteri?
I don't know.
It was attributed to him, but he actually never said or wrote that. From what I can tell,
remember, because this is something I picked up 20 plus years ago. But
it holds true. Whoever first said it. Exactly,
because when you look at, we'll say, the small hats, when you start following the nose, so to speak, you see who has the power in media conglomerates, who controls banks, who controls international NGO money, that kind of thing. It's pretty easy, to find who controls all of these hate speech, thought crime agencies like the SPLC and the ADL and all this other shit. And they're the ones who are going to come out on top if all of us just fight each other to dust, or fight each other into these endless nitpicking ethnic or racial wars. The one who controls the money and speech and the media, they're the only ones who are really going to come out on top after all of that. And that makes me angry. But I guess everybody present here kind of already knows that.
Yeah, well, let's look at it this way. They talk about institutional racism, systemic racism, all those kind of things. Well, who owns the institutions? Who controls everything? The media is Hollywood, and the big legacy media are all Democratic, all left-wing, all progressive.
That's a really long way to say Jews.
Well, yes, I mean, I think it's more than just them, but I certainly understand that they have.
I know it's not just Jews. I joke.
Right,
it's just high percentage.
Right. No, I agree. But yeah, they run everything, and then on top of that, you have the false dichotomy between the neocons and the neo-libs, who are both left, and they run everything. And then you have academia, all left-wing. So who actually has the institutional power? And it's so crazy that they frame it, and they have people so brainwashed to believe that, oh, it's white supremacists, oh, it's far-right extremists. And basically, because I'm a constitutionalist, a federalist, and a minarchist, I'm a far-right extremist. That's insane.
Yeah. I mean, we basically all are at this point, because we're not willing to, get on our knees and suck the dick of the diversity goddess. So we're basically all Hitler now. That's pretty much the narrative that's being painted. And if you see I'll link my video that I touch on this in the chat here. It's my most important video yet. It's where I break down exactly the plan of the New World Order. And we're not just talking about leftists. We're not just talking about, small hat bankers or whatever. It's that entire temple of people, that entire, there's a word. It's like a Gog of sin or something like that. Surely it'll come to me eventually.
Regarding headwear, there are small hats, tall hats, fluffy hats, hatlessness, sombreros, and more.
But people.
But joking aside, you're right. It's not just, this kind of activist or this kind of politician. It's this, what I like to call it what it is. It's this New World Order group. The rich and powerful bankers, the NGOs, China, UN, corrupt people in the American war machine that are allied with Israel. You've got all these people that actually care about the rich, powerful elites maintaining power. And everyone outside of that, in my opinion, is just a useful idiot being puppeted by this interconnected, multinational group of people who just want to stay mega rich and get in control of everything.
Agreed. And if you look back, you have people like H.G. Wells talking about the New World Order or the open conspiracy. You have people like Edward Bernays talking about propaganda and how they use it specifically to, manipulate your mind. And it's not like that this stuff hasn't been out in the open. There are dozens of documents all throughout time. I covered Event 201 briefly the other week. That was a crazy thing. Happened last October. Talked about a global, coup that just much like that's going on now, that 99% of people survive, but somehow we're still locked down 6 months later and doing all kinds of stupid stuff like wearing masks that don't really do anything for you. And it's crazy the amount of power and influence that these people actually have in this global government over all these other sovereign nations. I mean, or supposedly sovereign nations, right? Are we still sovereign?
Well, that depends.
It depends on
how do you define sovereignty?
Well, I just mean, do we as a people, whether in any Western country, actually dictate the course and direction of the country and our future, or is it really this cabal, of globalists that are dictating that?
Well, I think it is largely a quote unquote cabal, but I don't think there's some like secret meeting like in a Bond movie where they get together and are in cahoots. I think it's just, many generations of people that have different systems of power that all sort of want the same general thing, and they just sort of work towards their own interests, which is keeping all of us dumb and blind and fighting each other all the time.
No, and yes, I would agree. I'm not sitting here. When I say it's a cabal, though, I mean, look, we have like the World Bank, we have the World Economic Fund, we have the WHO, we have the UN. If you start researching, like your video, which was excellent.
Thank you. I put a lot of work into that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, it was great. When you start researching this stuff, and I've been reading about this stuff for 15 years, it's like you're really seeing that. Yes, it's not a bunch of people sitting in a room going, yeah, what am I going to do next?
But no, you're right. Like when I was looking into the UN stuff, you can see the dates and the locations of who went where, and then you plug in that event, and you go to Google Images, and you see pictures of like Louis Farrakhan and Chelsea Clinton and all these people going to the same hotels. You see people flying in from the United Arab Emirates and Israel and France and Sweden, and they're all flying into these big ritzy places. So it's not really that far out of the question to say that these rich elitist assholes do kind of all know each other at least a little bit through functions and stuff. So I don't know. It's just it's frustrating that when you start trying to piece this stuff together and make it public, it's like your channel always gets banned or buried, and it's really frustrating.
Well, look into the CFR and look at who. That's where our foreign policy is dictated from. That's David Rockefeller says it in his memoirs that if the charges are that I am part of some global conspiracy to bring about a one world government, guilty as charged. I mean, It's not conspiracy theory. It is fact. It is out there. They're open about it.
Yep. I mean, you got people all across the English-speaking world, I know, maybe even in other languages too, who openly talk about New World Order. I mean, going back 20 or 30 years to when we were young, I'm pretty sure that one of the presidents in the clip I used for that video was the first George Bush. And 88 to 92 was his presidency. He openly talked about establishing a New World Order for peace. And you've got asshats like the Clintons. You've got rich assholes that can't help but run off at the mouth. Brown. No, I was going to say Bill Gates. He talks about that shit too, and it's just it's so Absolutely. Obvious that they hate people like us that actually want communal ethnic sovereignty over our own communities and lands, and we want to tell these globalist pricks to get bent. And we get called the terrorists. We get called all these awful anti-white names. Or anti-white slurs, excuse me, when we try to name names and point the finger. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, Again, if you go back, I mean, there's a long history of this. Cecil B. Rhodes set up the Rhodes Scholars. And when Buttigieg came up and they were like, oh, he's a Rhodes Scholar, so that's prestigious. I'm like, okay, so he's just a globalist. I know what he is now. If you're part of the CFR, I know you're a globalist. It's pretty simple. I think if you just have a simple heuristic of if someone's part of these groups, Fauci is part of the WHO. He's a globalist.
I remember they wanted us to get excited about another Rhodes Scholar named William Jefferson Clinton.
Don't get me started with Cecil Rhodes, considering I have to deal with the bullshit regarding that university in recent weeks.
Rhodes Scholar, you mean Marxist activist?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, hell, I'm guessing you guys are all aware of how the Federal Reserve was founded.
Yes.
Yep, canards aplenty, if I recall correctly.
Well, for those who don't aware, there is a book on this called The Creature of Jekyll Island.
Yep, good read.
Yep, you can.
I got to meet that gentleman.
Yep, you can thank Kane for that.
Lord Maynard Keynes, is that what you're saying?
No, Glenn Jacobs, aka
Okay. There might still be some stuff on YouTube about that if people aren't readers. It's hard to say what's there anymore with all the censorship. But if not, I'm sure you could probably find a documentary on BitChute and get educated in about an hour to 2 hours if you're not aware about the monster from Jekyll Island.
Yeah, there's a lot to see over there.
Yeah, and to think the whole thing started because one particular king and queen decided to spend too much money on empire.
Speaking of things on BitChute, I am just now linking Evidence Violates Community Guidelines. Go ahead and go check out his work over on BitChute. And earlier in the stream, I shilled for Bill. Shilling for Bill.
Please shill.
Shill for Bill.
Trying to grow.
that's Bill's YouTube channel. Definitely check that out.
You can start a fan club for you, Bill, called Bill Shills.
Bill Shills.
You could do me a favor and start a clip channel because I don't do that stuff and I'm very long-winded.
The other channel that I just shared, the DLive link, that's ran by Tank. That's Bill's buddy, and they're the two that I had the excellent chat with Wednesday night for a couple of hours. We had a lot of fun, and they're going to start doing more community streams like that. So definitely give them a follow over there on DLive. And you said, Bill, you said that the DLive stuff gets uploaded to a YouTube channel, correct?
Yeah, the ends justify the memes is the
That's
YouTube
what I thought.
channel.
Let me pop that open and share that too, since I've got them on my sub list.
Just have to say that's a great name. The ends justify the memes.
Isn't it?
Yeah, that's probably going to go up into my top 10 channel handles of the ones I can think of off the top of my dome.
Well, this is all me. Tank is just basically a guy I got connected with to produce because I'm doing my own content, but I wanted to do a live show. And so he's basically my producer and someone to bounce ideas off of. And he's kind of he's like a big fan of like Curtis Yarvin and stuff like that. So it brings a different dynamic. And then of course, I'm very.
He's more of a monarchist, right? He likes centralized authority by the ruling elite and the strong, that kind of thing.
Well, I challenge him on this, but I think it's more that he sees that liberalism, at least in the classical sense, it leads to progressivism. That would be his general thesis.
Well, I mean, he's not wrong if you look at it ontologically, because ontologically, the only proof we have is it does always lead to cancerous progressivism. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that every type of what we call a liberal democracy has always been bad, but I do think that means we have a particular vulnerability built into our structures when we are a heavily liberal, individualistic society. We sort of lose that natural cohesion of unity and forcing strength to be what guides us instead of individuality guiding us. So we're going to have to find some way out of this and towards the future. And libertarianism just ain't going to cut it. That's why I bailed on that shit. It's just we need something stronger and something better.
Libertarianism only works in a very safe and stable society. It is useless in any other situation.
Right.
Sort of like welfare.
Right, and I always say that I love the idea of anarcho-capitalism myself. I played with it for years in my late 20s, but the reality is it is just as utopian as anarcho-communism. You have to have some sort of government rule, and hopefully the idea would be to keep that very limited and very restricted. And so Tank's whole thing is it's almost impossible to do that. The founders understood that through the centuries, millennia of history that we have. And it what do you do about it? And then of course there's the technological boom that we've had. And you very much are in the same mind that I am, that that's a part of it, and our comfort. We are so rich and so spoiled, we're too comfortable, and that makes us essentially forget about who is ruling us and allows them to do these stupid, devious things behind our back.
Yes, and I think that is a failing of our liberalism. Like it's been exploited. That's where we're at, and we can't just blame everything on the Marxists or the Bolsheviks. Like a lot of it is just human greed. Human greed, LLCs, corporations, rich people. They, in a liberal democracy where we've sort of been chiseled away at from our values, it's so much easier in an open system like ours for rich people to rapidly infect people with consumerism and credit and throwing people into debt and that kind of thing, just to make a dollar. And that's another thing that we have to gird ourselves against going forward, is that kind of, what they used to call social justice, generations ago before any of us were born, which was just working man wealth equality, that kind of stuff. We have to be careful of that going forward.
Well, Bastiat, go ahead, man.
No, I was just going to say that regarding the whole anarcho-capitalist thing, the funny thing is that when speaking to those types, they really do not understand how people work, and how the non-aggression pact is a very, very weak anchor to try and hold everyone accountable to.
Well, of course, because the vast majority of groups on Earth do not ascribe to that. They ascribe to might makes right. And if you are an NAP person, the person who doesn't mind to beat you with a stick and take your cheeseburger wins.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, sorry to interrupt, but it makes me laugh about those types who say to big social media companies, you are private companies and I respect whatever you do. And they just return with, lol, censored.
Well, this is a failure to understand human psychology and to understand history. And I think that's a big reason why the left needs to push the idea that there is no human nature, which is completely absurd. I was going to say Bastiat, writing in the 1800s, was taught very much about pillaging the government treasury for the people, and that if politicians can do that, that the people will just elect these politicians over and over again. And if you go all the way back to Aristotle talked about, most people aren't aware, the Greeks, many of the city-states had a universal basic income, and it continued to be raised over time. And he says, I'm paraphrasing, but almost exactly, he says, the greed of the human heart has no ends, has no bounds. So like we aren't a species that just came up yesterday. Society has been around for like 40 centuries, man. Like we have all kinds of evidence of how human beings act societally. And if anything, we can say that we've gotten maybe perhaps more moral, but to the point where we've become weak as well. And I'm a Christian, and I don't believe in inciting violence or anything like that. But part of the corruption of our society is this idea of extended altruism to everybody in our outgroup. And that's not a Christian idea. In Christianity, it was only to the churches. It was only to people who absolutely could not take care of themselves. As the Apostle Paul said, those who do not work do not eat.
Yes. And on that point, what was I going to say? Shit. Yeah, that it just makes me laugh. Like, since you brought up universal basic income, the amount of arguments I've had in like the past week where people are suggesting we need universal basic income, I'm just like, you guys are utterly stupid into understanding the reality of such a system itself. And people quote that video, that TED talk with that Dutch historian. I'm like, dude, your entire talk is ignorant on IQ, human psychology, economics, and history, despite him being a so-called historian.
the inflation alone, I mean, the mass
Yeah.
amount of inflation that will cause. And we can go to an example not too far back from the Ukraine, where the coal workers wanted their prices to go up. This was shortly, I believe, after the Soviet Union. They wanted the coal workers union wanted the wages to go up, and as that happened, all the prices around them went up. So then they needed another wage hike, and then all the prices went up, and then they needed another wage hike. And that is other than government, doing quantitative easing and devaluing money, that is another way that inflation happens.
Yeah, exactly. Because quantitative easing, it makes the quote-unquote new money, the valuable money that only the rich get, and then the quote-unquote old money, which most people have in their bank accounts and CDs and stuff, that becomes devalued. It's terrible.
Well,
quantitative easing. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, slight correction. Back then, they didn't do quantitative easing. It was just purely printing of money. Quantitative easing is the digital variant, which is common practice today.
Right.
Yeah, but they've been doing that for a long time now, haven't they? Like 30 years, 40 years?
Yes, but back in his time period, he's specific enough. That was back in the 1920s.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have missed that. I was busy typing and getting links and stuff. My bad.
No, it's fine. It's fine. But like I said, it's easy to mix the two. But they're basically the same thing. One's just physical, the other's digital. But go ahead.
I was just going to say that quantitative easing's a slick obfuscation for saying that they're providing more play money with which Wall Street and the Federal Reserve can plunder people before what's left of that money trickles down to the folks who are suffering the most.
Trickles down. Yeah. Well, that was a lie. But actually, speak slightly off topic, but if anyone here wants to do a little experiment just to see how badly they've been taxed out of the money, just go to a inflation calculator and go back 100 years.
Right.
See how much their money's worth then.
Well, if you recall, the United States, the what was it? $20 was worth about an ounce of gold. It fluctuated from like $18 to $22 for about 150 years or something like that. And then after we instituted the Federal Reserve, and especially after Nixon and the whole Bretton Woods thing, we got off the gold standard. That like completely destroyed us. Of course,
yeah, don't get me started on the
FDR, but yeah,
I hate Keynesianism. It's awful.
Don't. I despise it as well. I mean, the only thing that's ironically enough saved the United States in one sense was because of the fact that you have almost complete financial control of the oil supply in Saudi Arabia. You could offload a huge amount of the printed money to the rest of the world because they're going to need that money to be able to buy the oil.
While we're talking about economics here, there are two channels I want to share. One of them is by a brilliant, awesome American named Radical Liberation. I'm going to share that in the chat here too. And definitely check out his channel. They have awesome long live streams where him and a couple of other smart guys chat about particular pieces of our global economic problems, like what China's doing, the military-industrial complex of U.S. and Israel, that kind of thing. They have excellent long-form discussions and videos on that channel. And, of course, the legend himself, Academic Agent. He has amazing economics videos of all types over on his channel. If you want to know the dirt and the tea about economics and who's to blame, definitely check out academics stuff, especially Econ Shots. That's a fun little playlist that doesn't get enough love. So check out his Econ Shots. But I digress. We'll go ahead and pass it back to you two. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like his Boomer series, by the way.
Oh yeah, Boomer Truth is amazing. Academic Agent that I just shared, guys, he has an awesome series called Boomer Truth, where he goes all the way back to the Second Great War, and moves forward, talking about how the Boomer generation were the ones that basically started all. I mean, not to make it their fault. They're the ones that were the original victim group of what the cancer that we all talk about today started with, kind of the ground zero of the cancer.
Well, it's funny you mention that because that's what George Carlin used to say back in his comedic days. He said that boomers were the original spoiled generation.
Well, they were. They had, amazingly, they had a very great economy after all the deregulation. Before that, we were doing our own experiment in socialism under FDR and whatever else, and complete government centralized control. It's not like we've gotten away from that. It's just that we have less of it than they did at the time. We had ridiculous taxation, but despite all that, we still had some manufacturing before it started being outsourced to Japan and then later China. And so these people had pretty good lives. But I think, what he shows is the parents, for the most part, with that wealth, started neglecting their children, didn't correct their children, and at least the silent generation. And of course, my parents are boomers, but they grew up a little bit differently. They grew up poor and religious. So,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, hell, I'm technically a late millennial, but I despise that. I call myself an early Zenner because fuck millennials in general.
Hey, Streaky Bacon. Oh, I see some familiar faces in chat. Let's give some shout outs here. We've been jawing back and forth with Optics Guy and Maynard and a few others here. There's Alley Ghost. We got Reptile in the chat. We see Streaky Bacon, White Student Transmission. We got a few others up in here too. Good old
Reptile,
Johnny Reb.
Yeah.
Oh, you know Reptile too?
A little bit from chats. He and I have interacted a fair amount over the months.
Awesome.
For sure.
I appreciate everybody coming by today. We've got a fair number of viewers. I just wanted to give some shout outs. I'll go ahead and it's about at the turn of the hour, so I want to remind everyone, if you want to ask me, the co-host, or the panel, or the guests today, any questions or just make comments directly to them, you can do that over on the Entropy question widget. You can also show us some love financially, especially to help me buy a better microphone, by giving us some super chats over there on Entropy. And of course, they will get priority like always. So I'm going to go ahead and share that there. We don't have any questions yet on the question widget over on Entropy, so we're going to hold off on going to question time. So I do want to sort of change
the TV
gears.
show, by the way.
Do what now?
Oh, I was just making a joke about the BBC show Question Time.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I think that was, speaking of, Streaky Bacon brought up Unpopular Opinions, which is the Tuesday community show, a lot like this one over on AA's channel. Well, it's old. I should more say our show's like his. His came first, but it's a community stream over there, and they play games and stuff, and they did one like that. But I'd like to change topics now and talk about in the chat too. They've been talking about solutions are what matters and what we can do. And about 20 minutes ago, before we went down this path, I had asked Sterling here what he thought was the most valuable thing to do, the most valuable type of activism, what to do. And in my opinion, getting people to know the truth is the best thing that we can do right now. Because I understand people's desire to get guns and ammo, people's desires to, prepare for the boogaloo and all that. But I've been saying for a while, and I'm very glad to hear Jason Kuna over on No White Guilt say it too, that if it comes down to a real boogaloo situation where we're going to need bunkers and to survive, and our enemies are going to come to try to exterminate us in our bunkers, we have already lost our civilization at that point, and then it's just survival. I don't want it to get to that point. So that's why I'm doing all that I can to keep us from getting there. And in that, I think that sharing information and helping our people wake up to what's going on is the most important thing we can do. And the way that I do that is by spreading simple meme ideas. Like Jason Kuna, for example. I love his Going Free book. Using the meme No White Guilt. Telling people, instead of saying all these other words, just say anti-white. Talk about the anti-white narrative. That really works and resonates with normal people here. What are some things that you three think we can do to really help push back and hopefully break the shackles of this New World Order nonsense? We'll go ahead and start with Bill. What do you think?
Well, I agree that I think you should be prepared for any sort of disaster. I don't think, like the young man that got arrested the other day for being a shooter in self-defense, I don't think we need to be going out and doing that kind of stuff. If you have a business and you want to be on the rooftop and protect your business, that's one thing. But I don't think it's helpful for us to go out and proactively fight
100% agree, Bill. 100%. Like I believe in having guns. Like I tell people, have your guns, have your bunker, but don't spread the idea to people saying that this is what we should all be focusing on and doing, because then we all just end up in our own little holes and get exterminated later. Like we have to do something collectively, actively to fight back against this, or we're just letting them win in the long term.
Well, that's where I was going to go. I said, let them burn down their own cities, let them destroy, for lack of a better, terms, let them crap where they sleep. And as far as what we should do, I think that we need to understand that we can be individuals within a collective. And the collective right now, as Don from Plebeian Media would always say, all of those who are right of Mao. And we need to talk. We need to really join together. We need to speak up. And that was part of why I started my channel, because I'm just sick and tired of this crap. I've been wanting to do something for a while. I've had more opportunity now than ever because I just am not able to work with the pandemic nonsense. And so I'm like, just speak out. And even if that means you don't have to get on YouTube or do a podcast or any of that stuff, even if that means if you have a family member that says something crazy, speak out, say something, and try and organize with people with like-minded beliefs. And we have to reject the idea of going out and be proactively violent too. And that will be a problem for us, because the left has the institutional power, and they won't quash these people who are on the far left who are rioting right now. But I guarantee you, if people on the right come out, you're going to jail.
And more so than saying left and right, we should be honest and say what it is. It's white and non-white. And I mean, no, I'm not trying to turn everything into race here. I'm talking about the truth. Like when you look at people who are black in America, and they do something, if it is a black hurting another black, it doesn't matter the politics. The media buries it and won't talk about it. That's what we call a hush crime. When a non-white harms a white, well, that doesn't fit the narrative, and the media won't talk about it. That's a hush crime. These awful hush crimes, they only focus on white man bad, and it doesn't matter what your political leaning is. That's where we are with all of this, and it's disgusting. And like you were saying, we don't want to be the villains that the anti-white narrative wants us to be in the media. If you go out in the street like this champion, like this legend of a guy, Kyle, and you do something legendary, that's a 1 in a million chance. Kyle is lucky he's not dead. He's lucky he didn't accidentally end up shooting random people. Like, he's very fortunate that he had the skill and the wherewithal and the awareness and the good luck for all of that to come together for it to even be as good as it was for him. And he still might go to prison for a long time. Right. So it's like you were saying, we have to be very, very careful with our actions. And look at the McCloskeys. They didn't even shoot a bullet. They didn't even fire a gun. They didn't shoot anybody. And they got their weapons taken away. The police came to their property. And where they were, they had complete castle doctrine in the law, enshrined into the law. But when the anti-whites in local government won't enforce the law, then you're just as boned. So that's why I say we have to be careful about image, because everything in the power structure, the anti-white power structure we have here, it's going to want you to be the villain. They're going to want you to be all the anti-white slurs in the book. So don't give them the opportunity to do that to you and your family.
Well, make no mistake, we are in an asymmetric war right now. And a lot of it's cold. A lot of it's a cold war. And then there's skirmishes breaking out now. But it is absolutely asymmetric.
Damn right. And also, in regards to Kyle, from what I've heard, the person who defended the Covington kid is apparently going to take the case.
Good.
Yeah, hopefully.
That is some good news.
Yeah, although, like I said, I've heard that, but I'm not sure if that's been officially confirmed. But considering what that lawyer did for the Covington kid, and I'm not sure if they're still doing lawsuits against the rest of the freaking main establishment media companies.
Well, yes, to a point that you brought up too about the silent crimes, or those hidden crimes. Hush crimes. Yes. Sorry. What's interesting there too is if you look at, say, hate crimes, many of them are those hush crimes. Many of those Hasidic Jews who are attacked by, the Muslims.
Not many, most.
Right.
Most aggressive race-based hate crimes are not white on someone else. It's
That's right.
it's non-white on someone else, oftentimes white.
And
Yep.
that message needs to really be out there.
Yes, I think that's one of the main reasons that they scrubbed Vincent James's channels and depersoned him, is because a vast amount of his popular stuff was specifically about statistics on violent crime, and that really shattered the hush crime narrative. And I think that's one of the main reasons they scrubbed him.
Well, especially now, I was actually about to bring him up myself, because especially right now, with how long these riots have gone, how bad the polling has gotten, like I really think YouTube, they play these games, but they are for sure working to get the Dems in, and they're watching all this stuff, and when they see somebody like that, they go, we've let them go do this for way too long, and now's not the time. And Don Lemon admitting on CNN that, yeah, the Democrats are hurting in the polls, and what are you gonna do? Like the RNC last night, I don't normally watch those things, but I did, was quite good. It was pretty amazing as far as messaging and emotional appeal. And Anna Dorr, David Dorn's widow, was on, and that was very emotionally appealing to people who need that, to say, look, our country is burning. This is insanity. Look at who's allowing this to happen.
Does it sound like the delicious beverage juice?
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to. It's fun.
Nah,
I have a good time.
Honestly, it just makes me laugh just how utterly stupid people truly are. And I just have to ask myself, are these people being deliberately stupid, or are they or are they just so unbelievably dumb that they should be classified as mentally not to be allowed without wearing a helmet?
I don't think it's they're stupid, Kizza. I think it's a mix of being concerned for somebody's family and personal well-being, and feeling like they have no power. Because think about it. Most people have spouses and children in the white world, in our countries.
Yes. I wasn't referring to people like us. I'm talking about our opposition.
Oh, I thought you were talking about how people just don't realize this and aren't doing anything about it. You mean the people that are being drawn into this and are the useful idiots. That's what you're talking about.
Yes. It's like, for instance, one certain freaking fake commie trying to say, "Oh, mob justice is good."
yes.
That. Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry, but by using your own logic, everything the KKK did and the Jim Crow era was perfectly okay. I don't
want vouch retardation anywhere near my channel. I tell people all the time, don't argue with leftists, don't engage with these idiots unless you know that there is a large audience of neutral or vague people that you can witness to through the argument. Don't go onto their channels and engage in their retardation. It's a complete waste of your time, and you're only letting their Marxist cancer into your otherwise healthy soul. Don't do that. Let's not talk about him. He's just completely retarded.
Yeah, he's like Voldemort to me.
Yeah. It's just awful. So moving on away from that garbage.
Sorry.
Sterling, I'd like you to talk for a minute. Tell me what you think that not just content creators like us, but what people listening can do. What is one or two things that everybody listening can do to help improve our situation actively in their lives right now?
One key thing that people can do that's realistic for today's context would be to have both patience with themselves and patience with others as they learn and unlearn what needs it. We have been targeted for intellectual, emotional, and spiritual damage since before our births. And sometimes people get frustrated and feel as though folks should be already at some specific point of the narrative's challenging path, when a lot of folks out there just don't know a lot of the information because they don't have the time, because they haven't been tipped off. Maybe they're battling serious financial health or social problems or what have you. So we need to find people where they are. We need to remember that our first words as a baby weren't 9/11 truth. And so that's one key thing that people can do. And also there are things that we can do and things that we need to do. But another thing we can do too is we need to get our heads right. We need to challenge when phrases and acronyms and such suddenly become popular in mainstream culture or even become popular in our spheres. Is this language we want to use? Does this further psychological damage against ourselves, or does it help break that apart? So those would be two things: patience with ourselves and others, and also doing our best to get our heads right with the best replacement narratives and the best information we can find out there about topics that matter.
I think that's excellent. Thank you for sharing. Kiza, what are your suggestions?
Me personally, try and get a very large content creator to start bringing up this message, since they have a much bigger microphone, and maybe, dare I say, if you have the means to do so, try and challenge directly, face to face, certain people who push this narrative and put them on the back foot and make them defend what they say. Because quite often, when you make them face to face and they don't have a computer or can't hide behind a screen, they quite often cowered out. As I learned when I challenged someone from the Socialist Workers' Party on his topic regarding pushing the idea that the current government is a fascist government. And when I pointed out to him, if that was true, people like you would have been rounded up and been made an example of already, his entire narrative fell off the window.
Yep.
Yeah, and Sterling, you made a really good point there, I think, with the realize who you're dealing with. I talk about that a lot over on All-1, that, these people aren't developed soul. They're possessed by this ideology because they're being brainwashed. It's being inundated to them all the time, and they think that they're good people. And we've created a victim culture where victimhood is virtue. And so, we really do have to understand that you have to hold back your emotions. You can't get mad at these people as much as you would like to, as much as the stuff pisses me off often. When you're talking to somebody, you need to keep your cool and be rational. And we all, we're all growing, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't have the same talking points I did a month ago, and anybody who's part of this thing needs to stay sharp and realize that the goalposts move, the targets move, the attack vectors move and change. We can't just say the same thing all day, every day for years and it still be useful. We have to be willing to learn and to change our approach to how we can better interface with people and how we can better fight the psychological war that we're in. Because God knows our enemies are certainly like that. They're finding new attack vectors and way to shut us down by the day, and we need to keep up. So we have to make sure that those of us who actually are involved and care, like everybody here, we got to make sure to stay, keep our fingers on the pulse, so to speak. So we know, like, for example, keeping up with the current hush crimes, keeping up with current riots, keeping up with current legislation that might be shady, that's going to try to force some diversity into your local neighborhood, that kind of thing. You got to keep up to speed on this stuff so you can keep everybody aware and hopefully keep it from happening.
And remember out there, people, regarding television, keep up with never keeping up with the Kardashians.
That is very true. Also another thing, keep very aware of any events happening regarding the enemies, because sometimes you should be able to turn up, pretend you're one of them, and make sure you have a good camera on.
Yes.
And record the entire thing.
Yeah, that works really well, especially in places in America where there are big metro areas, or over in the UK. I know that it's pretty easy to get, because you can, within 2 or 3 hours drive, you can get to about anywhere if you live in the southern half of Britain, right?
Someone could start a tolerance and action series by doing that.
And also, I'd like to say to the chat, our good friend Lady Elaine over here, Lady Elaine brings up a really good point. It's okay to play the victim, but when you really are the victim, because our people, our children, our families, regular working class or even middle class folks in our countries are being purposefully victimized by this New World Order nonsense, by this anti-white narrative. So it's okay to say we are being oppressed and victimized because it's bloody true, isn't it? So don't be afraid to just come right out and say it and act like we're being victimized, because it's the truth. And that will actually get a lot more people to listen to you than you might think.
Yeah, I have no problem with saying that we're victimized or there's victimization. It's more like making it a virtue that is a problem, right? It's one thing.
Yeah. No, I wasn't disagreeing with you on that. It's just I like to be responsive to the chat a lot because it's
absolutely.
I like building a community.
I mean, my case, maybe some will consider this a very dirty tactic, and if you are validating our opposition's tactics, but I say just be better at the tactics that your opposition are doing.
Well, I'll tell you another thing that was mentioned about paying attention, at least from a Christian perspective. If anyone here is a Christian who is listening, you should be paying attention. That was a commandment from Christ to watch, to keep an eye out before the return of Christ, and whatever denomination of Christianity you might belong to. If you read your Bible, we are supposed to be paying attention to the events of the world, and we're also not supposed to be part of all of these worldly things, because those things are evil, and we see that. We see the way things are going, engineered, or if it's just the progress of humanity, whatever it is, there is a pervasive evilness of how the world interacts, and we need to be better about it, and we need to pay attention to those things. We can't just go, as much as I want to, and I probably will, go live off in the mountains out in the middle of nowhere. We still need to interact within society.
Right. That is true, yeah.
Absolutely. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier about, being prepared and having a few guns and having some extra ammo and food and water filters and stuff. That stuff's okay. Like, it's always good to be prepared, but we shouldn't be encouraging our people to just throw their hands up and give up on society and be like, well, screw it. Me and my family and my kin are going to just go live up on this mountain until we die. That ain't helping your people. That ain't helping your country. That ain't helping nothing.
Our enemies won't let that happen anyway.
Yeah, because eventually they're going to give us no quarter.
That they could just run. Yeah, I see this in chats. People say, "Well, I'm just watching Clown World burn from a distance, and I'm safe where I am." No, you aren't.
No, not for long. You won't be. Like, maybe for a decade, maybe for a generation, and then what have you done? You've let the whole world burn, and now your people have no future, and you go extinct. Like, it's BS, man. Like,
wouldn't it be crazy if the hardcore Amish got activated?
Oh man. But I pray to Internet Jesus every day that I wake up and I see Amish activists button heads with Antifa. It would be the greatest. It would be like Babylon Bee came to life. It would be the greatest thing.
They got that farmer strength. I don't think Antifa is going to do too well.
I know. They'd be out there with like plowshares and shit.
Media reports on butter churn extremists unjustly attacking Antifa for no reason whatsoever. Antifa showed up at an Amish village to spread love, tolerance, and understanding, and then the Amish snapped, and then suddenly plows and butter churns and shovels and Warcraft. Yeah, Amish Minecraft. You know how it goes.
Honestly, the most hilarious thing I remember seeing was on a regressive social media group claiming that the far right are way more dangerous than the anti-fascists. And then I posted a little terrorist freaking document of 1920 from the European Union, which debunked that entire narrative.
1920, what a year.
Yeah,
and you know what's even funnier? The European Union are very much liked by the regressives. So if they are saying that the far left are more dangerous than the far right, with the religion of peace being number one by a country mile, that should say everything.
Yeah.
It also makes me laugh.
Stabbings of peace.
Yeah, and it also, or trucks of peace, but it also makes me laugh. It also makes me laugh how these people try and claim that Antifa means anti-fascist. Like, no, it doesn't. It means you're pro-communism. You're at a tit. And even when I give them a Wikipedia article explaining them the origins of the party, they still don't get it.
Well, let's look at the thing is too is we always want to point, or they always want to point to the Nazis as if it was the only fascist regime throughout history.
Uh,
Well, it
Yeah,
wasn't fascist; it was National Socialist. It's different.
Well, I mean,
Mussolini in Italy, that was the fascists.
and he was
Yeah.
left wing technically, and he even admitted that.
yes.
Let's not do left wing and right wing arguments for stuff like that.
I know. I love
A
playing that
centralized
card.
totalitarian military power. It doesn't really matter if what you call it is left or right. It functions about the same.
Well, the economic system too is centralized power and control. It's not a free market. There is some freedom within the market, but in the end, the government controls all the resources. So it's closer to communism and socialism than anything. And my point.
That's an argument for another day. We can butt heads about that another day. But please continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all I'm saying is that there are other places to look throughout the world that have implemented so-called fascism, and there's only one that is focused on ever. And to me, China is very fascistic.
In my opinion, China is an actual functional national socialist state because it's more national socialistic than it is fascistic. Because fascistic is you have everything in the state, everything for the state. And China's not really like that. China's more of a controlled internal economy with a regulated series of agents and capability of synthesized free market with many elements of your internal economy nationalized with external economy not nationalized. And that's more of a national socialist structure. And that's why I think it functions better than if it was truly fascist. But I mean, a lot of the third positionist people, and I know that Keith Woods talks a lot about this kind of thing. That's why I'd love to get him on a stream one day, is I'm not someone who wants to just have a system that we already have or that we had in the past. I want to build a new system. And I want to look at all the systems that have come before, including Nazi Germany, including, Imperial Japan, including all the systems that have come before, and say, let's look at what worked and why, let's look at what failed and why, and what good things can we synthesize from all of these systems going forward. That's what I want. So that's why I like talking to people that have different, from ANCAP to New Fash to all these other ideas. I like to see what other people have to offer and put forward, just so we can have some better ideas of what a future model that works better for us might look like. I know that's not really connect to what the fuck you were talking about. I'm sorry, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I mean, me personally, maybe I'm just being biased here, but it sounds to me, I would dare argue what you need is a disgusting hybrid of benevolent dictatorship and national capitalism.
Yeah, and what I've proffered before in our discussions is if we could somehow get away from this cancer called democracy and somehow move towards only people that are meritocratically, demonstrably smart and good going into positions of influence and leadership, that's what we need to aim for. But we can't just do it by saying, oh, let's create a test and you have to test out before you can have any control. No, because then the people that are assholes can just rig the test. We need to develop some kind of social system where we encourage the smartest, the strongest, the wisest, etc., to prove themselves socially, and then we follow them because they are the best, and yet somehow have some version of market economy to go along with that. But it boggles my mind trying to think of how we get such a system in place. So maybe that's just a pipe dream. I don't know. But that's where my mind goes to when I try to think on a better structure.
Well, I mean, not to toot my own horn years or do another plug, but I think our little chat regarding what I call the Mirror Veritas will be a good starting point.
Maybe. We did talk about some stuff like that in that.
Yeah.
I have my issues with your Mirror Veritas thing because it would require, in my opinion, an unhealthy level of authoritarianism to enforce that upon people. But if we could get that to be sort of not enforced, but socially enforced, to make everyone face the music, so to speak, of their own failings and test out their things on themselves. If we could somehow implement that socially, I think that would work. But I wouldn't want to do it with state power.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic here, but I mean, again, we start talking about new systems and all, and I just think utopias. I don't know where in human history we've ever had a perfect system. One of the reasons why I'm
not talking about a perfect system. I said something that works better. Something that works better for us, not that works better for the rest of the damn country that wants a handout and somewhere to sleep. I want a system that works for our people. I want a system that works for our children, for our music, for Western civilization, not just what works for GDP or whoever the small hats want to send here on boats.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is we had that, I think, initially in America, and we gave it away. And, you could argue about the merits of the Constitution and whatever else. The thing I'm always seeing throughout history, whatever I read, economics, whatever, is that people always give away their personal sovereignty for personal gain. And the only way to fight against that, we talked about this a little bit the other day, is to have essentially some sort of spirituality, to have some sort of connection with God, to have some sort of grounded faith. So I don't know really any other way.
Yeah, like Jason Kuna says over in his stream, which I've learned a lot from this year, we need a psychological defense for the psychological war. And, if you want to split hairs about it, it's basically the same thing as we need to be spiritually unified and strong against the spiritual cancer that's being fed to us. Like, we need some type of, like Yuri Bezmenov talked about it too. Like the answer to the cancer is faith. The answer to the cancer is unity, is belief in your people, your community, your God, your church, and you need to nourish those things. You gotta water those things and cultivate those things, or you lose them, because we have enemies that want to strip those away from us and smash us. So we got to protect ourselves.
It's funny.
And that's why I think that having some kind of racial ethnic unity, we need that, because every ethnic group outside of white countries not only already has that, but it's actively encouraged in our countries. You ever stop and think about why that might be?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Years I did to use Yuri Bezmenov's 4 stages. I thought I'd coin my own 4 stages. I like to call them moralize, stabilization, secureness, normalization.
That's pretty good. I like that.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure. I'm not sure if all 3 of you want me to go into the ideas behind them.
I don't care. That's up to you.
Well, how long would it take? Because this would be a good basis for a one-on-one.
It would take me a few minutes.
Well, how long is a few minutes?
Like no more than 5.
Okay, well, go ahead and lay it on us here. Go ahead. I'm gonna shield some community creators while you do that.
Sure thing. No worries. Sure thing. So, if everyone's aware of the 4 stages that Yuri Bezmenov spoke of, this is effectively my idea of a reverse Eunuch card. So to moralize, as in to moralize the society, which will take some time, to make it a strong patriarchal mentality society and believe in national supremacy. Well, not let's say supremacy, but exceptionalism, culture, and so on and so forth. Stabilization, as in try and stabilize the entire economy, your society, your education system, etc., and treat any form of disruption, destabilization, like cryosurgery treats cancer, and then secureness, as in we're going out. You create a nation of secureness where people are not constantly looking over their shoulders about being theft or worrying about if their money's going to be in the account the next day and so on and so forth. And then you end up creating the new normalization, the new normal for society.
Yeah, I mean, that's I don't know, from my perspective, I mean, that's ideally what we want, right? We need to moralize the people, which is, I think, what we're all trying to do right now, right?
Yeah.
The people that have the correct perspective that this is going in the wrong direction and we don't want to live in a third world country. And I'm sure in the UK, I've heard about a lot of places that are turning very much into third world countries. Am I not correct?
Oh yeah. Parts of London, freaking Birmingham, so on and so forth. Forgive me for background noise. But yeah, basically the idea of moralize is basically taking, for instance, what Jason Kuna has done regarding his no white guilt thing to try and create a moral society and saying, no, we will not bow down to your BS. Our society is great. They are greater than anything you could produce. And the fact is that everyone wants to come here and copy us. So you don't like it, kindly go away and go and create your little wannabe state somewhere else. We don't want it. You are a minority. We are the super majority.
would you essentially say if in like some ideal system that you're potentially talking about, if someone doesn't go along with the general consensus of how that society should be progressing, then you're just excised immediately? Is that
Well,
what I would?
that kind of goes back to my earlier point about regarding subscription rights. As in, for instance, a communist, why should he have the benefits of our English liberal values and human rights when he doesn't ultimately respect them? And if they were in charge, they would happily get rid of them.
Right, and if you were in his ideal communist society, he would boot you out in a heartbeat or put you against the wall.
Exactly. So my mentality is basically why I said to years before, if anyone wants to go find our kids, colonists and the Brits talk, I think it's the third one. I spoke about the mirror of veritas, as in I would argue it's a perfect double-edged sword against authoritarianism. Now, yes, it's very complicated when you really break it down, but the idea is that the state will treat you exactly as how you wish to be treated in terms of raw or authoritarianism, or as in raw libertarianism. You are ultimately the deciding factor, not the state.
I put the playlist for mine and Kids' discussions in the chat. It's about 5 hours of good talk there. We talk about a lot of interesting things. It's good stuff.
But yes, so as I was saying, yes, while you was away, Jason Kuhner is doing a great job regarding the step one of the idea regarding moralize.
Yeah, because we have to moralize what's happening to us, because people have to realize what is happening isn't just an idea or a kind of politics. It's actually something morally wrong that's hurting them.
For sure. And obviously the idea of stabilization, not too much to repeat myself, is basically trying to bring about economic and social stability. So, for instance, pushing more towards national capitalism rather than globalism and international trade. More towards potentially going back to the gold system, and especially getting away from the Federal Reserve fractional reserve banking model we've been on for technically since the late 17th century. And then with those two steps, you end up creating a secure society. Not necessarily an authoritarian one where the state takes care of everything, but it's a very secure society where citizens don't have to constantly look over their shoulder or constantly worry like a crazy, overly worrying mother. And then you create... Sorry.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, I think that one of the things that often gets lost in discourse in England and in America is we talk about things being authoritarian as being bad because we have been mind-fucked into thinking that we have this wonderfully free society. No, we don't. When you look at the nuts and bolts of it, Americans are only marginally more free than people in other first world countries. And I know people that live in China. They have a lot of freedoms. Just because they have a quote-unquote authoritarian government that does shit like welding people in houses and facial recognition software and stuff, they have pretty much all of the social liberties that you and I do. They just aren't allowed to be activists about certain things to go against the state. That's one of the main liberty lines. But when you look at how we have to live, when you look at how people are constantly being screwed over by law enforcement, being screwed over by media, being depersoned, losing jobs, like how free do you really feel to speak your mind if you work for a corporation in America or the UK? How free are you really if you work in education in Scotland? How free are you if you work in technology in Silicon Valley, California? Like we have lost so much freedom. It's disgusting. And I don't know. I just get bent when people don't realize that. So it's not that we want something that's not authoritarian. We just want to subvert what already exists, which is pretty authoritarian, but at least to give us fair play so our voices can be heard, and then take whatever state structures or whatever the crap is going on around us and actually use that fairly. And I think that's what the conversation with normal people should be towards, is not necessarily libertarian versus authoritarian, but just the moral fairness argument about, hey, isn't it not fair how because of A, B, C, D, and E, this is a hush crime? Or, you know what's not fair is for every promotion, there's a demotion, or these people advocating for diversity. Well, what's that mean? That means that they're going to, you got 3 male children? Well, they're white? well, then they're very likely that their success, their careers, their placement in good schools is going to be given away to people that aren't them just because your children happen to be male and white. Like, those are the things that we need to start pushing as ideas, not some type of you're oppressed because of an authoritarian structure. We need to keep it in the terms that normal people will directly relate to on an ethical, moral level.
That is true. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what about freedom of the mind? And that's literally what it comes down to, is if you're not allowed to have your own thoughts, what freedom did you have in the end? So I like to defer to Solzhenitsyn and the people going along with the lie, or how you can't talk to an ideologue because their minds aren't free. They're literally spiritually possessed by this ideology. And that's the important part of developing that psyche. And in order to be free, and if we don't have that attitudinal spiritual relationship that with our society and with the creator of the universe, I don't know how you can maintain your proper mindset of a free person, because look, you can be enslaved in any numerous of ways, but the last thing that they will always get, at least for me, I mean, I'll go to my death over it, is my mind. You're not taking my mind from me.
Well, no, I get that. I get that. That's very important. And I think everyone in the West would agree with that. But that, in my opinion, that is not the most important thing. Now, I know that might sound heretical to somebody like you or Kiza, but the most important thing is survival of your people. And your survival of your people must take precedent if you are going to enforce your ideas and values to create social norms, to create traditions. You have to have collective force, both socially and through whatever type of governance is around you. And because of the cancer, because of the anti-white narrative, because of what we've lost as a people, we don't have our hands on the buttons anymore to secure our survival, to secure our people. And I'm not saying that we need to have some kind of, ridiculous violent uprising or anything. We can achieve all of this with awareness and being communal again, with actually rekindling the spirit of our people. And like you talk about, Bill, faith, it can be a big part of that. You build better communities, you uplift better youth ministers, you uplift better church leaders. And when you start having this thread of community and spirit, then you start naturally pushing back against this cancer. You push the cancer out of your local church. You push the cancer out of your local business. Push it out of your local school. And another thing that I talk about a lot in my videos of what we can do, be very cognizant of your local of your local ballots and your local appointments. Because not a lot of people realize that there's a lot of people in politics that you don't vote for. They get appointed by the people you do vote for. So pay attention to local statutes, local people you vote for. Keep the cancer out at a local level, and that will eventually help keep the cancer out at the state and the federal level. I'll be quiet. I'll pass it back. I'm sorry. I'm talking a lot today. I get heated.
It's fine. It's fine. We like it. It shows passion.
Yes, absolutely. All I would say to that is I don't think we disagree at all. I think that we all have our own tactics and specialities and where we focus. And that's the point of understanding that we are in a collective, but we are individuals, and that we need to come together. And so we're not arguing really, like none of us are against each other. We're not arguing with each other, infighting per se. We're exploring ideas, and we all are going to have our own form of activism and our own form of perspectives. And I think that's how we are going to heal our societies. We're going to improve and make them stronger. And a big thing I talk about often is exactly that, making a strong society, because that is really the problem. And I don't mean strength as far as violence. I mean strength like mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all that stuff. And we are just so weak, so weak. We're so dependent on the government, and we're cut off and isolated from our neighbors most often.
Excuse me. I'd like to take this quick moment to read a super chat that we got over on Entropy. This is from blank or double underscore. Double underscore says, if we really wanted to stamp out China, and global slavery, the U.S. shouldn't allow the importation of goods unless the factories are within our standards of minimum wage and overtime, etc. I completely agree. I think that that's one way that we could absolutely start enforcing not just business and production to come back to our soil, but to ensure that, for example, China isn't going to have access to our massive consumerist market. And I think that would not only hurt them and push back on them, but it would be good for our economy and our people here too. I think that's excellent, and we should all push that to, local politicians. We should email our state representatives, our senators, that kind of thing, governors, and let them know that we want that kind of thing. Good comment. Thank you for the super chat. I deeply appreciate it.
Yes. Sorry about that. I was just had a little interruption there. But,
no problem. Welcome back.
Yeah. We're all ultimately on the same side. I think it's just a question of what we find is the best situation to deal with the current predicament at hand. Now, me personally, I always find that it's not necessarily a case of standing back and letting them destroy the pup, but sort of, in a way, kind of psychologically trick them into making them stand up to what they truly believe in and making themselves held accountable to their own ideology.
Well, that does work with the useful idiots, but they're disposable. That doesn't work with the Rothschild. That doesn't work with the Bill Gates. That doesn't work with these kind of people. It works with local politicians and some higher level politicians. But remember, they're not the top of the pyramid in the power structure. They are the top of the pyramid in the power structure that regular people can know and interact with. The people at the real top of the power structure are, I'm not talking about something make-believe. I'm talking about the real people that, like good old Ron Paul on his Liberty stream. He calls it the deep state. People like your Rothschilds and your investors and the people that run the NGOs and the people that sit on the boards of multinational corporations that can use billions of dollars to lobby different countries' politicians. Those are the real people at the top of the power pyramid. And none of what you're talking about can influence them. But what we can do is influence people locally to help fight back against the vectors through which their stooges, the useful idiots, use to exploit us.
Yeah, generally, in the past, if you wanted to do that, you had to get your hands a little dirty and make these people an offer they can't refuse.
Yeah, it's interesting because you got to wonder, in the past, there have been people of power who have been overthrown by uprisings, but there's always someone there to take power for themselves. And that's one of the problems with any sort of uprising. And so, again, I hate to beat a dead horse here, but it's like you got to get the people thinking right so that they just don't listen to the supposed experts. And that's the thing, is that we have given up a lot of our autonomy to people. And I get it. Not everyone can read all the time and not everyone's as intelligent to understand. And I understand all of that, but we can't just have the society that's based on experts. We can't have this technocracy where we let the supposed experts dictate everything to everybody, because that's how you get a form of tyranny. And go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but all I was going to say is, isn't it funny how so many of the so-called experts have been repeatedly found to be wrong for so long? At what point does someone cease to be an expert and be branded as a fake and a hypocrite and a failure and be kicked out of society?
But it's the emotional appeal of that, though, to people, I believe, that, oh, look, this is the they're the expert. I don't know anything. And, it's this false humility. I'm just saying, with a lot of people I've talked to, that seems to be the case. Other people who have a rational mind, they certainly go, that guy's full of something. He ain't right about that,
Well, yeah, I know this with a certain so-called law student who who was forced to mute me on Twitter when I pointed out some fatal flaws with what some of the claims he was making, and even citing the very fucking legislation he was referencing, and also having to throw an English dictionary at him, theoretically speaking, like when it comes to the European Union and the topic of Brexit. And it still makes me laugh how, to this very day, people do not understand the definition of the word sovereignty.
Right.
Yeah.
Because how can a nation be sovereign if it takes laws and orders from a foreign government?
Yeah.
I mean, as I try and explain to people, the only way the UK could be sovereign and be inside the European Union is if it was ruling the whole damn thing, aka Empire 2.0.
Well, the thing is, if the European Union was what it was supposed to be, which is just about trade negotiation or trade regulation, like that, you could still have a sovereign state that participates in a sort of, for lack of a better word, it's a trade syndicate. Like, if you want to create a trade syndicate through which multiple sovereign states go through, that's fine. But not this Soviet superstate nonsense that it's become. Like, that's right out.
Well,
like, you can't have sovereignty and still be under something like that tells you who you have to let in and out of your country, how your politicians have to comport themselves, how your money has to be spent, that kind of crap. That can't go.
No, but what kind of makes me laugh about that is, I think I mentioned to you before, years, but to our guests, are you two aware of what the actual idea behind the so-called United States of Europe actually was?
No, I am not.
I was always under the impression that you're going to have a unified one nation Europe, much like the United States, and we would have, much like the United States has lost each state, a state being a country of its own, has lost much of their own sovereignties under our system. I saw that for sure when the European Union was going into effect.
Okay, and for Sterling, what did you think it was meant to be?
I would say that I prefer Sir Oswald Mosley's take to Claude Juncker's take.
Oh, that's funny you mention that. But no, that's not actually what it was meant to be. It was actually meant to be something ironically far darker.
Okay, well, explain, please.
Okay. A lot of the Europhiles like to coin Churchill as the man who came up with the idea of a United States of Europe. But what he had in mind, referencing his thoughts and regarding old speeches he made, the Europeans would not have liked his idea if it was truly enforced. And you are all going to laugh at this. His idea was to have France and Germany in a quote-unquote coalition, and you had the United States, the Soviet Union, and the UK basically watching over them with very large guns pointed at their heads, figuratively and literally speaking, saying, if you cause trouble, we will wipe you out.
All right.
Because of the UK's problem with the rest of Europe forever.
Yeah. Now, how does that sound to you now, knowing that?
Sounds to me like people haven't learned about not poking the Germans.
Yeah, for real.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe don't do that.
Yeah, but that's the funny thing. If you try and explain that to big Europhiles, and they're like, no, he didn't mean that. I was like, really? Explain this in the speech and explain the points where he said the UK should be outside it. And how he said that Britain, America, and Russia should watch over them. What do you honestly think he meant by that? Come on now, Churchill wasn't some big man for liberty, as a lot of people say that. He was really an aggressive. He was very much an aggressive, freaking Western supremacist, English supremacist bastard. In retrospect.
Yeah, but he's the guy you guys needed at the time too, for sure.
Oh no, I appreciate what he did for the war, but do not talk about his second reign. It's so bad that nobody even referenced. Most people forget they even had a second reign.
Well, isn't that when, as well, though, the majority of like the Labour Party and the Fabian Socialism really kind of just went crazy through England?
Well, technically speaking, if you're going to quote, for instance, a lot of what George Orwell put, a lot of the leftist types were already, thanks to Karl Marx, ironically enough, Karl Marx effectively indirectly created the group what is known as the Fabian Socialists back in the 1920s, who were the original Champagne Socialists, as most people would call them. And they were the ones in very much high politics, and they were the ones who obviously had huge influence and numbers. Let's say huge, but high rates per capita per se, in, for instance, the media, especially the BBC at the time, and also in higher education. Hence why George Orwell spoke about so much of them.
Right. Well, I mean, just my understanding is a big reason why Labor had gained so much power, and later on, especially during the 70s, there was so much welfare in the UK that when Thatcher came in, some things had to be corrected and whatnot. You would know better in the history of all this.
Well,
It's that you had to reconstruct things after the war, largely, and that's why that kind of.
well, in that regard, what actually happened was, this is what a lot of people don't speak about, was what happened was after the war, the UK basically went into actual austerity measures throughout the 40s and 50s and even the early 60s to basically be able to raise money to be able to pay off our debts that we owed, but also we ended up finding the NHS at the time, which was basically there to address the, like for instance, all the injured soldiers, so on and so forth, which is basically what got Labour into power initially back after World War II. But then what happened was, throughout the time of the 60s, because of the war, the government had huge control of a lot of industries. And it didn't, relent all of its controls back to the private sector, which is ironically enough what we and the Americans basically did to West Germany at the time, whereas we basically deregulated them, but we instead increased in the UK's case, increased our regulations. As ironic as that sounds. And basically as time went on, when the EEC was first founded, the UK wanted to get in at the time because of the idea of free trade and all that. But the French leader at the time, de Gaulle, if memory serves, he basically said no, all because of a spat that he and Churchill had during World War II, where he said something along the lines of, "If I had to choose you or America, I would choose you. I would choose America every day of the week."
Well, supposedly the French also invented democracy, and they have like the best language ever. So.
Well. I mean, I know Yiz absolutely hates democracy, but as I like to explain to people, democracy has. Well, I hate to use the communist narrative here, but democracy has never actually been tried throughout all of human history.
No, come on now. Come on. Yes, it has. Yes, it has. I mean, we've had mob rule all over the place. You've had mob rule in everywhere from Rome to the broken streets of the Weimar Republic. Like, mob rule is the inevitable end result of democracy.
Well,
wasn't it communism
always
the
happens.
result of democracy?
Hold on. Yes, sorry to interrupt, guys, but just to counter that, name one thing. I will use the United States as an example. Name one thing in the last 50 years that you could directly associate to mob rule regarding policy.
Regarding policy?
Yeah.
The Civil Rights Act.
Okay, there's one.
All right.
Anything else?
Well, okay. Regarding American policy, where the majority of people got what they wanted. Let's see.
Or demanded.
Well, I would say as she thinks about that, though, America was
What
set
they
up
were
as
told to
a
demand by the people who run the democratic circus.
right.
Yeah,
America was set up though as a republic, and it wasn't.
Yeah,
supposed to be a
exactly.
Yeah,
direct
that's the thing. This is. Go ahead.
No, because the reason I say that is because if I were to use the UK, for example, almost nothing about the UK's policies regarding welfare, immigration, foreign policy ever had a democratic mandate in any sense of the word.
Okay,
It
yeah,
was
I know, but
Yeah.
Yes, you're talking about referendum democracy there.
No,
Yeah,
I'm not talking about referendum. I'm talking like pure, unadulterated mob rule by the public.
Well,
okay,
right.
well, that's not the systems that we've had, dude. So,
Referendum
like,
is one
that's
of the
not.
ways that can manifest.
Sorry,
Well,
I didn't mean to talk over you, Sterling. I didn't mean you.
Yeah.
Take that again.
I was just saying that a referendum is one of the ways that such a thing can manifest.
Well, that's true, but like what I'm saying is that, like, for instance, the whole topic of mass migration in the United Kingdom, that has never had public support in any of its histories, even as far back. And if you want case of point to that, just look up the public's polls when Enoch Powell made his infamous "There Is a Blood" speech, and to quote a Michael Heseltine from a BBC documentary from 1995, which sadly you can't find nowadays thanks to YouTube. Sorry, YouTube. As he likes to refer to as, apparently, according to Michael Heseltine, if there had been an American-style election when after Enoch Powell made that speech, Enoch Powell would have won by the biggest landslide in political history.
Yeah, you folks were never asked about Empire Bum Rush. We were never asked about the 1965 Migration Act. That was certainly not a groundswell from everyday Americans who suddenly wanted to be demographically displaced drastically within a generation or two.
Mm-hmm. And also, speaking of things that people think were mob rule or democratic in America, people didn't like slavery, and they were glad to be rid of that, even a lot of Southerners. But women's suffrage was not that popular, even among women.
Yeah.
Let that sink in. Let that sink in.
That's absolutely correct, Yiz. And
Yep.
slavery was really interesting because if you read far enough back the writings of the founders, they just didn't know what to do with the people who were enslaved because they weren't well educated, and they most of that was under English law originally before America was founded, and they were like, we don't know what to do with these people. We think in time the system will go away, and a lot of people don't know. I mean, of course, it makes sense because the slavery was in the South. But there were like 4 times more abolitionists in the South than there were, elsewhere, spreading knowledge and trying to get this to go on. So, or to go away. But women's suffrage, yeah, that was something else. That was engineered for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I'm back.
It's all right.
Yeah. But
As we grow close to the end of the stream today, we don't actually have any questions at all over on the entropy widget. Usually we have at least a couple. So you've got a couple of minutes to get in anything you'd like to say on the widget. Any last minute donations, go ahead and pop those in over on the entropy widget as well, and I'll get them read. So as we're winding down here, I'd like to thank both of my guests for coming today. Let's start with Sterling. Sterling, do you have any projects that are coming up, any streams or anything you'd like to shill here at the end of the show or talk about before we leave?
That I would like to shill. I will professionally articulate what's coming up.
Love it.
Tomorrow on my main YouTube channel, we are going to have a fun premiere at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, US, and it's going to feature Things English Isles.
Okay.
But it's something that affects all of us. So if people would like some fun, some comedy, and some inspiration all at once, we'll see you tomorrow at my main channel.
And that's on BitChute, correct?
No, that's at my main YouTube.
Your YouTube channel. Okay.
Which has been a little quiet because YouTube has not respected my privilege, power, and/or supremacy that I wield over all power centers of the West with my other fellow toxic males. But yeah, if folks go to my main YouTube channel.
Okay, I'm sorry, but today I thought that your primary was your BitChute and your YouTubes were just your backups. I'm sorry. I've been sharing your BitChute. My bad.
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, BitChute's a good thing to share just in case there's an excessive outbreak of freedom and/or diversity on my channel, which has happened in the past. But let me give you the link for the thing tomorrow. So,
well, I've already got your channel here in the chat. I've got your YouTube channels here in the chat.
Oh, okay. Then no worries. But yeah, that's what's coming up immediately. And then I've had a couple conversations that'll be uploaded in the next month or two. We'll see how it goes. Sounds
good. Bill, what about you? What do you got coming up here? I'll go ahead and plug all your links here while we're talking.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not sure. I might try and do some content tonight. Probably not the weekend. I usually try to work through the week. I do have some stuff coming up I'm going to do on the Second Amendment. I had some ideas about covering Mao's Little Red Book, as well as de Tocqueville's stance on socialism. So I'm going to do some stuff like that. Every now and again, I'll end up covering news, not because I'm trying to cover news, but it's just relevant. And then obviously, guys, go check me out on Ends Justify Memes on DLive every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to try and have more guests, but if not, it's just me and Tank having fun talking about stuff we want to talk about. And kind of like this, it's important ideas.
Well, I certainly had a blast on your D-Live chat the other day, and I would definitely be glad to come back again sometime. And if we can ever have a stream later in the day, Tank is always welcome to come on my show too.
Yeah, unfortunately, he has a job, unlike me. So, you know. But
all right, well, we're gonna wrap it up there. We like to keep these right around the 2-hour mark. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna pop over to Academic Agent's cigar stream, and that is going to be boom right there. And later tonight, after the cigar stream at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can find me and the White Positive community at Chuck Martell's Garage Party. And there we have it. So I would like to thank Sterling of Evidence Violates Community Guidelines, and I would like to thank Bill of oh shit, I've already put all minus one. I don't know why I can't remember that. All minus one and ends justify the memes. Thank you both. You're always welcome back. And with that, I'm going to say adieu. Go ahead and say your goodbyes, everybody.
Take care, Ro.
Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow at the channel if you can make it. Invite folks. Cheers.
Yeah, guys, check me out if you liked anything I said. And thank you, Yiz. Love you, and hope to have you on again soon.
Love you too. Love for all my White Positive brothers and sisters, and love for all my fellow Americans in this hard time. And until next week, take care and God bless.